The scream tore through the winter silence before Hawk Riley even understood what was happening, her body already sinking into something that should not exist beneath 3 feet of snow. One moment, she had been trudging through the white expanse outside Wichita, Kansas, searching for her father's cattle that had wandered from their winter pasture, and the next, the ground gave way like a trap door to hell. The snow had concealed it perfectly, this pocket of quicksand, fed by an underground spring that refused to freeze even in the brutal winter of 1884. And now the thick, cold muck was pulling her down with methodical hunger. She clawed at the snow around her, but her gloved hands only found more of the white powder that collapsed inward, adding to the weight dragging her under. The quicksand was different from what she had heard about in stories, the cold making it sluggish but no less deadly, and it crept up past her waist as panic seized her chest. Her father had warned her about the strange wet patches in this area, places where the ground stayed soft, even when everything else froze solid, but she had not been paying attention. She had been thinking about the argument they had that morning, about how he wanted her to marry Gerald Peterson, the banker's son, and how she wanted anything but that comfortable, suffocating future. Now she might not have any future at all. Hawk opened her mouth to scream again, but the cold had stolen her breath, and only a weak cry emerged. Her horse had bolted the moment the ground started giving way, and she was alone in this white wasteland with nothing but her own foolishness for company. The quicksand reached her ribs, and she felt the terrible truth settling over her, like the snow that had caused this trap in the first place. She was going to die out here, and no one would find her until spring thaw revealed what was left. Then she heard hoofbeats, fast and urgent, coming from the direction of the tree line. She twisted her head, ignoring the way the movement made her sink another inch, and saw him, a cowboy on a paint horse, riding hard through the snow with his dark coat flying behind him like wings. He was tall in the saddle, and even from a distance she could see the determined set of his jaw, the way his eyes assessed the situation with the kind of quick intelligence that meant the difference between life and death on the frontier. He pulled his horse up short about 20 feet away, far enough that the animal would not risk the same fate, and swung down from the saddle in one fluid motion. His boots hit the snow, and he was already moving, already scanning the area with those sharp eyes. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair that needed a trim, and a face that was more handsome than she had time to properly appreciate, given that she was currently sinking to her death. "Do not move," he called out, his voice deep and steady. "Every movement makes it worse." "I know that," she snapped back, fear making her sharp. "I am not an idiot." "Did not say you were," he replied, already circling the area, testing the snow with his boot before each step. "Said do not move. There is a difference." He found what he was looking for, a dead cottonwood branch half buried in a snowdrift, thick as her arm and long enough to bridge the distance between them. He hauled it free and brushed off the snow, testing its strength with a quick flex that showed the muscles in his forearms, even through his coat. Then he was moving toward her again, each step careful and deliberate, spreading his weight as much as possible. The quicksand had reached her chest, and breathing was getting harder. The cold mud pressed against her lungs like a vice, and she could feel the numbness spreading through her legs. She had maybe 2 minutes before it reached her shoulders, maybe 3 before it covered her face. After that, nothing. "I am going to throw this branch to you," the cowboy said, and his voice was calm, so calm it almost made her angry. How could he be calm when she was dying? "You are going to grab it with both hands and hold on. Do not try to pull yourself out. Just hold on and let me do the work, understand?" "Yes," she managed, her teeth chattering. "When I say grab, you grab, not before. If you lunge for it and miss, you will go under. Wait for my word." She nodded, not trusting her voice anymore. He planted his feet, the branch held like a spear in his hands, and his eyes locked on hers. They were blue, she realized, pale blue like winter sky. "Ready?" "Ready." "Grab!" He threw the branch, and it flew straight and true, landing across her chest within easy reach. She seized it with both hands, her gloves finding purchase on the rough bark, and held on with all the strength left in her arms. "Good girl," he said, and started pulling. The quicksand did not want to let her go. She felt the terrible suction as he hauled backward, felt the mud trying to keep its prize. But the cowboy was strong, and he knew what he was doing. He pulled hand over hand, backing up step by careful step, dragging her toward solid ground, inch by agonizing inch. The branch creaked but held, and she held on to it like it was the last solid thing in the world. Her waist emerged from the quicksand, then her hips, her thighs. The suction released with an obscene sucking sound, and suddenly she was sliding across the snow, still clinging to the branch, until she reached ground that did not give way beneath her. The cowboy pulled her another 10 feet for good measure, then dropped to his knees beside her, his hands already checking her over for injury. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "Did you hit anything on the way down?" She was shaking too hard to answer, her whole body convulsing with cold and shock and relief. The quicksand had soaked through her clothes from the waist down, and the winter air was already turning the mud to ice against her skin. She tried to speak, but only a sob came out, then another, and then she was crying in great heaving gasps that she could not control. "Hey, hey now," the cowboy said, and his voice had gone soft. "You are all right. You are safe now." He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, then scooped her up like she weighed nothing at all. She was not a small woman, tall and strong from years of ranch work, but he carried her to his horse without any apparent effort. Up close, she could see the details she had missed before: the scar on his left cheekbone, the calluses on his hands, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. He smelled like leather and wood smoke and horse, and under any other circumstances she would have been mortified to be this close to a strange man. But right now she just buried her face against his chest and tried to stop shaking. He settled her sideways on his saddle and swung up behind her, one arm holding her steady, while the other gathered the reins. The paint horse started moving without any visible signal, heading back toward the tree line at a careful walk. The cowboy kept his arm around her, his body blocking the worst of the wind, and after a few minutes she managed to get her breathing under control. "Thank you," she whispered. "No need," he said. Anyone would have done the same. No one else was here. She felt rather than saw his small smile. "Fair point." They rode in silence for a while, following a path through the trees that she did not recognize. Her father's ranch was east of here, or at least she thought it was east, but her sense of direction had gone the way of everything else. She was so cold now that she could not feel her feet at all, and her hands were starting to hurt with that deep ache that meant frostbite was a real possibility. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My place. It is closer than town, and you need to get warm and dry before you lose any toes." She wanted to protest, wanted to insist he take her home, but she did not have the strength. Besides, he was right. Her father's ranch was at least an hour away, and she would not make it that far in wet clothes in this weather. So she just nodded and let herself sag against him, conserving what little warmth she had left. His place turned out to be a small cabin tucked into a hollow where 3 hills met, protected from the worst of the prairie winds. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and gray against the white sky, and she saw a small barn and corral beside the cabin. It was modest but well maintained, the kind of place a man built when he intended to stay. He dismounted and pulled her down after him, carrying her again when her legs would not hold her weight. The door swung open under his boot, and then they were inside, blessed warmth washing over her like a physical thing. He set her on a chair near the fireplace and immediately started building up the flames, adding logs until the fire roared. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," he said. "All business now. Do you have any feeling in your feet?" "No," she admitted. His jaw tightened. "Hands? They hurt. Good. Pain means the blood is still flowing." He stood and moved to a trunk against the wall, pulling out what looked like men's long underwear and a thick wool shirt. These will be too big, but they are dry and warm. Can you undress yourself, or do you need help? Her face flamed despite the cold. I can manage. I will turn my back. Call out if you need anything. He suited action to words, moving to the small kitchen area and busying himself with lighting the stove. Hawk struggled out of her wet clothes with numb fingers, peeling away layers that felt like they had frozen to her skin. Her skirt was ruined, caked with half-frozen mud, and her stockings were not much better. She left everything in a sodden pile and pulled on the dry clothes he had given her. He was right about the size. The underwear hung loose on her frame, and the shirt came down to her knees, but they were blissfully warm and dry. Decent, she called out. He turned back around and nodded approval. Better. Now let me see your feet. She started to argue, but one look at his face told her it would be pointless. He knelt in front of her chair and took her left foot in his hands, examining it with careful attention. His fingers were gentle as they pressed against her sole, testing for damage. You got lucky, he said after checking both feet. Cold but not frozen. You will keep all your toes. Hands? She held them out and he examined those too, the same gentle care, and she found herself studying him while he worked. He had a strong face, she decided, all clean lines and sharp angles softened only slightly by the curve of his mouth. There was a quiet competence to him that she liked, a sense that he could handle whatever the world threw at him without fuss or drama. You will be fine, he pronounced, releasing her hands. Sore for a few days, but fine. I do not even know your name, she said. Bennett Armstrong. He moved to the stove where a kettle was starting to steam. Most folks call me Ben. I am Hawk Riley. He glanced back at her with a small smile. I know who you are. Your father's place is about 10 miles east of here. He runs Riley Ranch, the spread with the RR brand. How did you know I was in trouble? I was checking my fence line when I heard you scream. Sound carries in the cold. He poured hot water into a mug and added something from a tin. Coffee. Drink it slow. She took the mug gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. The coffee was strong and bitter and tasted like the best thing she had ever consumed. You saved my life. Happened to be in the right place at the right time. Still, thank you. Ben settled into a chair across from her, his own mug of coffee cradled in his hands. What were you doing out there alone? That area is dangerous in winter. Looking for strays. We had 3 head wander off from the winter pasture. My father sent me to find them. She took another sip of coffee. I should have been paying more attention to where I was walking. Easy to do when the snow covers everything. He studied her for a moment. Your father know you are out here? Not exactly. I mean, he knows I went looking for the cattle, but he thinks I am checking the South Range. She saw his expression change slightly, a flicker of disapproval. I know. I should have told someone where I was really going. Yes, you should have. The bluntness surprised her, but she appreciated it more than empty platitudes. You are right, it was stupid. Not stupid, just young. He stood and moved to a cabinet, pulling out a pan and some eggs. When did you eat last? Breakfast. She watched him crack eggs into the pan, his movements efficient and practiced. You do not have to feed me. You nearly died. You need to eat. He sliced bread and put it onto toast, then added bacon to another pan. The smell made her stomach growl loudly enough that he heard it and smiled. Thought so. They ate in companionable silence, and Hawk found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. She was in a strange man's cabin, wearing his clothes, having just escaped death by quicksand. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt oddly comfortable. Safe. Do you live here alone? She asked, immediately regretting the question. It was none of her business. But Ben just nodded. Built the cabin 2 years ago when I decided to stay in Kansas. Been working on building up a herd, doing odd jobs when I need extra cash. Where are you from originally? Colorado. My family had a ranch outside Denver, but I wanted my own place. He refilled her coffee. What about you? Born here? Born and raised. My mother died when I was 12, so it has just been my father and me for the past 10 years. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug again. He wants me to get married, settle down. Says ranching is no life for a woman. What do you want? The question caught her off guard. No one ever asked her what she wanted. They told her what she should want, what was proper and practical and safe. But no one just asked. I want to run the ranch, she said slowly. I know every inch of our land, every head of cattle, every fence line that needs mending. I am better at it than most of the men my father employs. But he cannot see past the fact that I am his daughter. Ben nodded thoughtfully. My mother ran our ranch for 5 years after my father died. Did a better job than he ever had, if I am being honest. She had a head for numbers and planning that he lacked. Really? Really? She only remarried because she wanted to, not because she needed a man to run things for her. He stood and collected their plates. Your father is lucky to have you, even if he does not know it yet. Something warm unfurled in Hawk's chest at his words, something that had nothing to do with the fire or the hot coffee. She watched him wash the dishes, watched the way his hands moved with the same careful competence he had shown when examining her for frostbite. He was different from the men she knew in Wichita, different from Gerald Peterson with his soft hands and softer ambitions. Ben Armstrong had built something with his own hands, carved a life out of the harsh Kansas prairie, and he did not seem to think there was anything wrong with a woman who wanted to do the same. The light outside had started to fade, the short winter day drawing to a close. Ben glanced at the window and frowned. Storm is moving in. I can see it in the way the light is changing. Hawk stood and looked outside, and her heart sank. He was right. The clouds had thickened and lowered, and the wind had picked up, driving snow horizontally across the yard. I need to get home. My father will be worried. Not in this, you do not. That is a proper blizzard coming, and we would not make it half a mile before we froze to death. But my father... We'll assume you are holed up somewhere safe waiting out the storm. That is what any sensible person would do. He moved to add more wood to the fire. You can take the bed. I will sleep out here. She wanted to argue, but the wind was already howling around the cabin, and she knew he was right. Going out in a blizzard was suicide, plain and simple. I do not want to put you out of your bed. You are not putting me out. I have slept in worse places than in front of a warm fire. He pulled a blanket from a chest and spread it on the floor near the fireplace. Get some rest. We will head to your father's place first thing in the morning when the storm clears. The bed was in a small room, partitioned off from the main space, with a real mattress and quilts that smelled like cedar and fresh air. Hawk lay down fully clothed, too aware of the man just beyond the thin wall, too aware of how strange this whole situation was. She should have been frightened, or at least uncomfortable. A proper young lady would be having vapors at the impropriety of spending the night in a bachelor's cabin. But Hawk had never been a proper young lady, and she found she was not frightened at all. She woke in the deep darkness of night to the sound of the wind shrieking around the cabin walls. The storm had hit full force, and she could hear snow pelting against the window like handfuls of rice. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself, then heard another sound beneath the wind. Movement in the main room. She got up and padded to the doorway on silent feet. Ben was sitting by the fire, feeding logs into the flames to keep them burning through the night. The firelight caught the planes of his face, turning them into shadow and gold, and she found herself staring. Cannot sleep? He asked without turning around. The storm woke me. She moved to sit beside him, pulling one of the quilts around her shoulders. You should be sleeping. Someone needs to tend the fire. Gets cold fast when it goes out. They sat in silence for a while, watching the flames dance. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin was warm and safe, a small pocket of light in the darkness. Hawk found herself intensely aware of Ben's presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the way his shoulder was just inches from hers. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure. Why did you come to Kansas? Colorado is beautiful, and you said your family had a ranch there. Why leave?" He was quiet for a long moment, and she thought maybe he would not answer. Then he said, "My mother remarried a man who wanted to change everything my father built. Good man, but he had his own ideas about how to run things. My older brother sided with him, and I could see where it was headed. Arguments, resentment, the ranch torn apart from the inside." He poked at the fire. "Seemed easier to just go somewhere new, start fresh without all that baggage. Do you regret it? Some days. It gets lonely out here." He glanced at her. "But I would rather be lonely than fighting with family every day. Some things are not worth the cost." Hawk understood that in a way she had not expected to. "My father wants me to marry Gerald Peterson. Do you know him? The banker's son? I have seen him around town. Soft hands, fancy vest. That is the one." She pulled the quilt tighter. "He is not a bad man. Just boring. And he wants a wife who will stay home and have babies and never question anything he says. That is not who I am. So do not marry him. It is not that simple. My father thinks it is a good match, and I owe him everything. He raised me on his own after my mother died, taught me everything I know about ranching even though he thinks I should not be doing it. How can I disappoint him?" "By living your own life instead of the one he planned for you." Ben's voice was gentle but firm. "Your father loves you. He will forgive you for choosing differently than he hoped. But you will never forgive yourself if you marry someone you do not love just to make him happy." The words hit her like a physical blow because they were so absolutely true. She had been circling around that truth for months, trying to find a way to make everyone happy, but there was no way. Someone was going to be disappointed, and it should not be her. "You are very wise for a cowboy," she said softly. "I am very wise because I am a cowboy. You learn a lot about life when you spend most of it alone with your thoughts." She turned to look at him and found he was already looking at her. The firelight caught in his eyes, turning them from pale blue to something warmer, and her breath caught in her chest. There was something happening here, something she had not anticipated and did not fully understand. An electricity in the air between them, a pull like gravity. "Ben!" she whispered, not sure what she was asking. "I know," he said, and she realized he felt it too. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of dark hair back from her face. His fingers were warm against her cheek, calloused and gentle, and she found herself leaning into the touch without meaning to. They were close now, so close she could see the darker ring around his irises, could count his eyelashes if she wanted to. "This is probably a bad idea," he said, but he did not pull away. "Probably," she agreed. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. She kissed him back with all the longing she had not known she was carrying, all the hunger for something real and true and chosen. His arms came around her and she melted into him, into the warmth and strength and rightness of it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "That was definitely a bad idea." "The best bad idea ever," she said, and felt his laugh rumble through his chest. "Your father is going to shoot me." "Only if I let him, and I will not." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want this. I want you. But I need to know if you want the same thing. I have wanted it since the moment I pulled you out of that quicksand, looking like a half-drowned cat, and still somehow the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I looked terrible. You looked alive. That is beautiful enough for me." They sat together by the fire as the storm raged outside, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Ben told her about Colorado, about his mother and brother and the ranch he had left behind. She told him about growing up on the Kansas prairie, about her mother's death and her father's grief and her own dreams for the future. The words flowed easy between them, easier than they should have for two people who had just met, but Hawk supposed, nearly dying together, accelerated things somewhat. As dawn approached and the storm began to blow itself out, they finally lay down together on the blankets by the fire, careful not to touch beyond holding hands. It felt right, lying there together, watching the flames die down to embers. It felt like something that was always meant to happen, like all the choices in her life had been leading to this moment with this man. When we go back, everything will be complicated, she said softly. I know. My father will not approve. He will say you are not good enough, that you do not have enough land or money or prospects. He would be right about the money and land. I am still building here. But he would be wrong about everything else. She turned her head to look at him. I do not care about money or land. I care about you. We have known each other less than a day. I know it is insane. Completely insane, he agreed. And I feel exactly the same way. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped between them, and when Hawk woke to watery morning sunlight filtering through the windows, her first thought was that she was home. Not her father's ranch, not the house where she had grown up. Here, with Ben. This was home. The ride to Riley Ranch took almost 2 hours through snow-heavy terrain. Her father's cattle, the ones she had been searching for when she found the Quicksand, had made their way home on their own during the storm. They found them in the pasture nearest the house, placidly chewing hay like they had not caused all this trouble. Her father met them on the porch, his face going from relief to confusion to anger in the space of a heartbeat. Hawk, where have you been? I have had men searching for you all night. She slid down from Ben's horse, her legs still a little unsteady. There was an accident. I fell into quicksand near the cottonwood grove. Mr. Armstrong saved my life. Her father's anger drained away, replaced by horror. Quicksand? How? It was hidden under the snow. I did not see it until I was already sinking. She gestured to Ben, who had dismounted and stood a respectful distance away. If he had not been nearby, I would have died. Her father looked at Ben properly for the first time, taking in his rough clothes and work-worn hands. You pulled her out? Yes, sir. And brought her to your place because it was closer than here? The storm was coming in. I did not think we would make it this far before it hit. Her father studied him for a long moment, and Hawk held her breath. Then her father stuck out his hand. Thomas Riley, I owe you a debt I can never repay. Ben shook his hand firmly. Bennett Armstrong, and you do not owe me anything. Anyone would have done the same. But not anyone was there. You were. Her father glanced at Hawk, and she saw him taking in the oversized clothes, the way she stood a little closer to Ben than was strictly proper. His eyes narrowed. Where did you sleep last night? The cabin only has one bed, Ben said calmly. She took it, and I slept by the fire. Nothing improper happened. It was not quite a lie. They had slept by the fire together, but nothing beyond kissing had happened. Still, Hawk felt her face heat at her father's scrutiny. He knew her too well, and she could see him reading all the things she was not saying. Come inside, he said finally. Both of you. You must be half frozen, and I want to hear this whole story properly. Inside the house, Hawk changed into her own clothes, while Ben sat in the kitchen with her father. She could hear the low rumble of their voices through the wall as she dressed, could not make out words but could tell from the tone that her father was interrogating him thoroughly. When she emerged, her long dark hair braided down her back and dressed in a simple work dress, both men looked up. Your father tells me you have a homestead 10 miles west of here, her father said to Ben. How much land? 160 acres. I am hoping to expand in the next few years if I can save enough. Ben's voice was respectful, but not subservient. I run about 50 head of cattle currently, and I do contract work for some of the bigger ranches to supplement. That is not much to support a family on. No, sir, it is not. But I am building towards something larger. It just takes time. Her father looked between them, and Hawk saw the moment he understood. His face went very still. Hawk, may I speak with you alone? She followed him into the parlor, her heart hammering. He closed the door and turned to face her with an expression she could not read. How long have you known this man? Since yesterday. Since he pulled me from the quicksand. And in that time, something has developed between you. It was not a question, so she did not bother denying it. Yes, you have a responsibility to this family, an obligation. Gerald Peterson is a good match, secure and stable. He can give you a comfortable life. I do not want a comfortable life with Gerald Peterson. I want a real life with someone I choose. You barely know him. I know him better than I have ever known Gerald, and I have known Gerald for 5 years. She took a deep breath. Father, I nearly died yesterday. When I was sinking into that quicksand, all I could think was that I had wasted my whole life trying to be what other people wanted me to be. I do not want to waste any more time. So you plan to throw yourself at the first cowboy who showed you kindness? The words stung, but she kept her voice level. I plan to get to know a man who sees me as an equal, who does not think I need to be changed or managed or protected from myself. Is that really so terrible? Her father's shoulders sagged. I just want you to be safe. Happy. I know, but safe and happy are not the same thing. She took his hand. Let me choose my own path, even if it is not the one you would pick for me. He was quiet for a long time, and she could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he sighed. You are so much like your mother. She was stubborn too, always insisting on doing things her own way. Drove me half mad most of the time. But you loved her, more than anything in this world. He squeezed her hand. All right, I will give your Mr. Armstrong a chance to prove himself. But if he hurts you, I will make him wish he had left you in that quicksand. He will not hurt me. You cannot know that. Yes, I can. And somehow, impossibly, she could. When they returned to the kitchen, Ben stood up immediately, reading the tension in the room. Her father studied him for another long moment, then said, My daughter seems to think you are worth knowing better. I hope to prove her right, sir. You will come to dinner tomorrow night. We will talk about your plans, your prospects, all of that. And if I am satisfied, you may call on Hawk properly. Understood? Ben's face remained impassive, but Hawk saw the relief in his eyes. Understood. Thank you, sir. Do not thank me yet. I am a hard man to satisfy when it comes to my daughter. He turned to Hawk. And you, young lady, are not to go gallivanting alone across the countryside anymore. If you insist on working this ranch, you do it with one of the hands accompanying you. Those are my terms. It was a compromise, and they both knew it. She was not going to get everything she wanted, but she was getting more than she had dared hope for a day ago. Agreed. Ben left shortly after, riding back toward his homestead through the snow-covered landscape. Hawk watched from the window until he disappeared from view, already counting the hours until she would see him again. The next evening, Ben arrived exactly on time, riding up to the ranch house on his paint horse with his hair neatly trimmed and wearing what was clearly his best shirt. Hawk met him at the door, her own dress carefully chosen, and for a moment they just looked at each other. You clean up nice, she said. So do you. He offered his arm. Ready for this? As ready as I will ever be. Dinner was a lengthy interrogation disguised as a meal. Her father asked Ben about everything from his family background to his plans for expanding his herd, his political views, to his opinion on the best way to treat screwworm in cattle. Ben answered every question with patient honesty, never trying to oversell himself or make promises he could not keep. Hawk watched her father slowly, grudgingly, come around. By the time her father brought out the whiskey after dinner, she knew Ben had passed the test. You can call on her twice a week, her father announced. Supervised visits, nothing improper. If after 6 months you are both still of the same mind, We will discuss a potential engagement. But I reserve the right to end this at any time if I think you are not treating my daughter with the respect she deserves. That is more than fair, sir. Ben glanced at Hawk. If she will have me under those terms. She will, Hawk said, ignoring her father's glare at her forwardness. Over the following weeks, Ben came to call every Wednesday and Saturday evening. They sat in the parlor with her father reading in the corner, talking about their days and their plans and their dreams. It was chaste and proper and absolutely maddening, but Hawk treasured every moment. Between visits, she threw herself into ranch work with renewed energy, proving to her father that she was serious about learning the business inside and out. Ben brought her small gifts, things he had made himself or found on his property. A piece of petrified wood polished smooth, a carving of a horse he had whittled during long evenings. She gave him books from her mother's collection, careful that her father did not see, and a scarf she knitted herself during the lonely days between his visits. Spring came slowly, the snow melting in fits and starts, revealing the brown grass underneath. The quicksand that had nearly killed her was marked now with stakes and warning signs, and Hawk gave it a wide berth whenever she rode past. She never wanted to forget how close she had come to dying, how that terrible moment had brought Ben into her life. 3 months into their courtship, Ben asked her father's permission to take her riding, just the two of them. Her father agreed with obvious reluctance, and the next Saturday they saddled up and headed out across the prairie. It was the first time they had been truly alone since that night by the fire, and the awareness of it hung between them like a living thing. They rode in silence for a while, heading toward a rise that overlooked both their properties. At the top, Ben dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "I have been thinking," he said. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled. "Probably. But I have been thinking about the future, about what I want to build, and I realized I do not want to build it alone." Her heart started beating faster. "No, no. I want to build it with you. I want to combine our land, run twice as many cattle, build a house big enough for a family. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep with you every night. I want everything with you, Hawk." She could hardly breathe. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking if you will marry me. I know it has not been 6 months yet, and I know I do not have much to offer right now. But I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life building something worthy of you." "Yes," she said, the word bursting out of her. "Yes, of course, yes." He kissed her then, properly kissed her for the first time since that night in his cabin, and it was even better than she remembered. When they finally pulled apart, both grinning like fools, she saw that he had tears in his eyes. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you fighting that quicksand, refusing to give up even when you thought you were going to die. I love you too. I think I have loved you since you told me your mother ran her ranch better than your father did." They rode back to her father's ranch, hand in hand, their horses walking so close their legs brushed together. Her father took one look at their faces and sighed. "I suppose you are going to tell me you are engaged." "Yes, sir," Ben said. "With or without your blessing, though we would prefer to have it." Her father looked at Hawk. "You are certain? This is what you want?" "More certain than I have ever been about anything." "Then I suppose I am gaining a son-in-law." He held out his hand to Ben. "Welcome to the family, and God help you because you are going to need it with this one." They were married in late May when the prairie was green and covered with wildflowers. The ceremony took place at the small church in Wichita, with half the town in attendance. Hawk wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her taller frame, and Ben wore a new suit that he had saved for months to buy. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ben kissed her with such joy that the whole congregation laughed and applauded. Her father gave them a wedding gift of 50 head of cattle and legal deed to the land that connected their two properties. "Build something good," he told them. "Something your mother would have been proud of." They moved into Ben's cabin at first, the small space feeling even smaller with two people's possessions crammed inside. But they were happy in a way that Hawk had not known was possible. They worked side by side every day, mending fences and tending cattle and planning for the future. At night, they lay in each other's arms and talked about the house they would build, the children they wanted to have, the ranch they would create together. By the end of summer, Hawk was pregnant. She told Ben one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with delight, then set her down carefully like she might break. "We are having a baby," he said wonderingly. "We are having a baby," she confirmed. They broke ground on the new house in September, a proper two-story building with enough room for a large family. Her father sent over some of his men to help, and neighbors pitched in as well, the way frontier communities did. The walls went up quickly, and by the time the first snow fell, they had a roof overhead and windows installed. The baby came in early March, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after her father, and when the old man held his grandson for the first time, he cried without shame. "Your mother would have loved this," he told Hawk, the baby cradled in his arms. "She always wanted grandchildren. I wish she could have met him. She knows, somehow she knows." The years that followed were full of work and love and slow, steady growth. The ranch they built together became one of the most successful in the county, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. They had 3 more children, 2 daughters and another son, and the house that had seemed so large at first filled with noise and laughter. Her father moved in with them when he got too old to manage on his own, and he spent his final years teaching his grandchildren everything he had taught Hawk, all the knowledge of ranching and the land. When he died peacefully in his sleep at 72, they buried him next to Hawk's mother, on a hill overlooking the property, where he could watch over everything he had built. Ben proved to be everything Hawk had known he would be. A partner in every sense of the word, he valued her opinions and deferred to her expertise, and he never once suggested she should stay in the house while he handled the ranch work. They built an empire together, literally and figuratively, and they did it as equals. On their 20th anniversary, they rode out to the place where they had first met, where the quicksand had nearly claimed her life. The warning stakes were still there, weathered but standing, and the snow was light that year, barely covering the ground. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not been there that day?" Ben asked. "Sometimes, but then I realized there is no point in thinking about it because you were there. That is what matters. We were lucky. We were blessed." She turned to him, this man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. His hair was starting to gray at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he was still the handsomest man she had ever seen. "I would go through it all again, the quicksand, and the fear and everything, if it meant ending up here with you. You will not have to. I am not going anywhere. Promise?" "Promise." They rode back to the house together as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in colors that had no names. Their children were waiting, the older ones helping with dinner while the younger ones did their schoolwork at the kitchen table. This was their legacy, Hawk thought. Not just the land or the cattle or the house, but this family they had created together. This love that had started with a branch thrown across quicksand and had grown into something that would last beyond their lifetimes. That night, lying in bed with Ben's arms around her, Hawk thought back to the girl she had been 20 years ago, lost and angry and searching for something she could not name. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, that a moment of terror would lead to a lifetime of happiness, would she believe it? Probably not. But that was all right. Some things you had to live to understand. "What are you thinking about?" Ben murmured against her hair. "Quicksand," she said. "That is a strange thing to think about on our anniversary." "Not really. The quicksand brought you to me. In a way, it was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Second best," he corrected. "The best thing was having the sense to grab that branch when I threw it. She laughed and turned in his arms to kiss him. 20 years, and it still felt like that first kiss by the fire in his cabin, full of promise and possibility. I love you, Bennett Armstrong. I love you too, Hawk Armstrong. Forever. And forever was exactly what they got. Ben lived to see all four of their children married, lived to hold his first grandchild, and teach him to ride just as he had taught his own children. Hawk ran the ranch until she was 70, finally passing the reins to Thomas, who had inherited both his parents' love of the land and their skill at managing it. When Ben died at 78, he went peacefully in his sleep, the same way her father had. Hawk held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful they had been given so many years together. They buried him on the hill next to her parents, overlooking the ranch they had built together. Hawk lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, telling stories about the old days when Kansas was still wild and a branch thrown across quicksand could change the course of a life. She told them about the love she and Ben had shared, how it had started with a rescue and grown into something that shaped everything they became. When her time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by family, with a smile on her face. Her last words were, "Tell Ben I am coming." And her children knew she had finally found the peace that had eluded her since his death. They buried her next to him, their headstones simple but elegant, marking the resting place of two people who had loved deeply and well. The ranch passed to their children and their children's children, each generation adding to the legacy while remembering the story of how it all began. And sometimes, on cold winter days, when the snow covered the ground and hid the dangers beneath, workers on the Armstrong Ranch would ride past the old quicksand site with its weathered warning stakes and think about the young woman who nearly died there and the cowboy who saved her with nothing but a branch and quick thinking. It had been the start of something beautiful, something that lasted long after both of them were gone. That was the real legacy, not the land or the money or the cattle. It was the love story that had started with a scream in the wilderness and ended with two people who had built a life together based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the knowledge that they were better together than they ever could have been apart. The Armstrong Ranch still stands today, a testament to what two people can build when they find each other against all odds. And on quiet nights, when the wind blows just right across the Kansas prairie, some folks swear they can hear the echo of laughter from the old homestead, the sound of a love that death itself could not diminish. It was a simple story, really. A woman fell into quicksand, hidden beneath snow. A cowboy threw her a branch and pulled her free. But from that simple beginning grew something extraordinary, something that proved love could bloom even in the harshest conditions, could thrive even when logic said it should not work. Hawk and Ben Armstrong had beaten the odds in every way that mattered. They had built a successful ranch in difficult country, raised 4 children who grew into good people, and created a partnership that lasted until death parted them and beyond. Theirs was a love story for the ages, the kind that people told around campfires and dinner tables, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. And it all started with a moment of terror, a desperate cry for help, and a man who happened to be in the right place at the right time with a branch and the courage to act. Everything else followed from that single choice, that one instant when Ben Armstrong decided to risk his own safety to save a stranger. That was the magic of it, really. The entire trajectory of 2 lives had changed because one person heard a cry for help and chose to answer it. How many people rode past moments like that every day, too busy or too cautious to get involved? How many love stories never happened because someone did not throw the branch, did not offer the hand, did not take the chance? Ben and Hawk had been lucky, yes, but they had also been brave. Brave enough to trust a stranger, brave enough to fall in love quickly, brave enough to build a life together despite all the obstacles in their way. That bravery had paid off in ways neither of them could have imagined that cold winter day in 1884. The Armstrong children grew up hearing the story so many times they could recite it from memory. how their mother had been searching for stray cattle and stepped onto quicksand hidden beneath snow, how their father had heard her scream and ridden hard to reach her, how he had thrown a branch and pulled her free, and how that single act of heroism had sparked a love that would define both their lives. When Thomas Armstrong, the eldest son, told the story to his own children, he always emphasized the same thing his parents had taught him, that love required action, not just feeling. His father had not just felt sympathy for the woman drowning in quicksand, he had done something about it. He had acted immediately and without thought for his own safety. And that willingness to act, to put someone else's needs ahead of his own comfort, had been the foundation of everything that followed. It was a lesson the Armstrong family carried forward through the generations. Act with courage, love with your whole heart, build something that lasts, and always, always throw the branch to someone who is drowning, because you never know where that simple act of kindness might lead. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, and eventually under his son's management after him. Each generation added their own innovations while staying true to the principles Ben and Hawk had established: fair dealing, hard work, respect for the land and the animals, and above all, the understanding that success meant nothing if you did not have someone to share it with. The old cabin where Ben had lived when he was a bachelor, where Hawk had spent that first night after her rescue, was preserved as a historical site on the property. The Armstrong family maintained it carefully, replacing boards when they rotted, keeping the roof sound, ensuring that future generations could see where it all began. School children from Wichita sometimes took field trips to visit it, learning about frontier life and hearing the story of the quicksand rescue that had started the Armstrong dynasty. But the real memorial to Ben and Hawk Armstrong was not the cabin or the ranch or even the thriving town of Wichita that had grown up around them. It was the love they had shared, the example they had set, and the proof they had provided that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely circumstances. A woman drowning in quicksand covered by snow should have been a tragedy. Instead, it became the first chapter in a love story that would be told for over a century, inspiring countless others to take chances on love, to act with courage, and to believe that sometimes fate puts you in exactly the right place at exactly the right time for a reason. And so the story ends where it began, with snow-covered prairie and hidden dangers and the kind of love that only comes once in a lifetime. Ben and Hawk Armstrong had lived that love fully, without reservation or regret, and they had left behind a legacy that would endure long after the last traces of their physical presence had faded from the earth. Some stories are meant to be remembered, meant to be passed down through the generations as examples of how to live and love and build something meaningful. The story of the quicksand rescue and the marriage that followed was one of those stories. It reminded people that heroism could be found in simple acts of kindness, that love could bloom in unexpected places, and that the choices we make in moments of crisis can shape the entire course of our lives. The Armstrong family knew this truth deep in their bones, passed down from parent to child like a precious heirloom. They knew that their entire existence stemmed from one man's decision to ride toward a scream instead of away from it, to throw a branch instead of turning his back, to open his home and his heart to a stranger who needed help. That was the real miracle of the story. Not that Ben had saved Hawk from the quicksand, though that was miracle enough. The real miracle was what happened next, how two people who should have been nothing more than rescuer and rescued became partners, lovers, soulmates, how they built a life together that outlasted them both, creating ripples that spread forward through time, touching lives and inspiring hearts decades after they were gone. In the end, love was the branch Ben threw to Hawk that day, and she had grabbed it with both hands and held on tight, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting and true. That was their gift to the world, their proof that love was worth the risk, worth the effort, worth everything. And on cold winter nights, when snow covered the Kansas prairie and hid the world beneath a blanket of white, The Armstrong family would gather around the fire and tell the story again, keeping it alive for another generation. They would speak of courage and love and the power of being in the right place at the right time. They would honor the memory of Ben and Hawk, two people who had found each other against all odds and had made the most of the gift they had been given. That was how love stories were supposed to end, not with the death of the lovers, but with the continuation of their legacy, the spreading of their light to everyone they touched. Ben and Hawk Armstrong had loved well and lived well, and their story would be told for as long as there were people who believed in the power of love to transform lives and create miracles. The quicksand was still there, of course, a geological feature that predated human settlement and would likely outlast it. But its meaning had changed. What had once been simply a danger to be avoided had become something more, a symbol of how close we all come to disaster every day and how much we need each other to survive. The warning stakes stood as a reminder not just of physical danger, but of the importance of being there for one another, of listening for the cries of those in trouble, and responding with compassion and courage. Every year on their anniversary, the Armstrong family would make a pilgrimage to that spot, standing together near the warning stakes and remembering the day it all began. They would tell the story again, making sure the youngest members of the family knew their history, knew where they came from and what they represented. And they would recommit themselves to living the way Ben and Hawk had lived, with integrity and courage and hearts open to love. That was the true ending of the story. Not death, but continuation. Not an ending, but a beginning that kept repeating with each new generation. Ben and Hawk Armstrong had shown everyone who came after them that love was worth fighting for, worth building a life around, worth everything. And their descendants carried that lesson forward, living proof that the best legacies are not measured in money or land, but in the love we share and the lives we touch. So the story concludes, not with an ending, but with a promise, a commitment to carry forward the love that had started with a branch thrown across quicksand on a cold winter day in 1884. Ben and Hawk Armstrong had loved deeply and well, and they had taught everyone who came after them to do the same. That was their gift, their legacy, and their eternal triumph over the quicksand that had tried to claim Hawk's life all those years ago. Love had saved her that day. First Ben's compassionate action, and then the love that grew between them. And that love continued to save people, generation after generation, reminding them that we are all connected, all dependent on each other, all capable of being both rescuer and rescued. In the end, that was what the story of Ben and Hawk Armstrong really meant. It meant that love was the branch we all needed to grab onto, the thing that could pull us free from whatever threatened to drag us under. And if we held on tight and trusted each other, we could build something beautiful together, something that would last long after we were gone.